Hi everyone, Sean Healy, NLP trainer and change agent here, and you're watching the Relationship Resourcing Series, a series designed to provide education and resource to help people have better quality relationships. Today's episode, the immature relationship partner, and it's a special episode because today I've got my friend with me, PJ, who's an optimization coach and NLP master practitioner, and one of my dear friends and my intellectual support group. One of the people that I bounce topics off and consult with in terms of some of the material I put forward in these clips and in the podcast series, Sean Healy Tools. So I thought I'd invite PJ back on for another episode and we would have some conversation about immaturity in relationship. So welcome to the episode.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me again.
Yes, excellent. Always great to have you
on.
It's an interesting kind of topic, immaturity in relationship.
And I was a bit worried because you said that before you introduced me. And I thought, oh, hang on a moment.
Here's a couple of experts in immaturity. It's one of those kinds of things. So
it's definitely me.
Yeah, absolutely, and me too. But that's again, if you've seen some of our other clips, when we talk about clusters of behaviours, because when we'll talk about some of the ways in which immaturity shows up in relationship. Hey, we've all been there. We've all had those experiences where we've had less than mature or adult moments in relationships. So, yes, you will spot things here that you've done from time to time. I know I certainly have, just speaking for myself. But this is more, again, about if we see these patterns appearing chronically, repeatedly, they're quite rigid. We can almost bank on the fact that this is how our partner is going to respond in, this situation, or this is their patterns around money or things like that. So that's more what we're talking about here, that when we talk about rigid, repeated, expected responses consistently over time, rather than once in a while we have a grand moment and then we don't. So in order to kind of help the people watching, what kind of things are we talking about when we talk about spotting immature behaviour? How does it show up in adult relationships?
It's an interesting one because it shows up so clearly once you know what you're looking for, like anything else. But immaturity in adult relationships or adults shows up just like a teenager in an adult body. So, and by teenager I'm talking about sort of early teen, 12 to 13, to late teen, sort of 16, 17, and anywhere in that band. And there will be the way that they respond to things would be if you literally just blanked the face out and looked at the tonality, the body language, the response patterns. It would emulate a teenager between the age of 12 to 17 or somewhere inside of that. And you may well be able to pick out exactly that at the age that it's playing out from, which is the most interesting part, because we know that there's different teenage behaviours that happen at 13 to 15, 16. And they're distinctly different things. You get more and more sophisticated, different types of behaviours emerge, but they're very much adolescent responses to adult issues. And so there is a mismatch there. And I think the easiest way to spot it is dial into what a typical teenager would respond like to a situation like this, and the way of seeing the world and seeing the situation from somebody who is anywhere from 12 to 17. And that's generally how they respond in grown-up situations. So it could be even in dealing with a bank teller, they may respond to them from an immature set of behaviours. So it's not limited to intimate relationships, family, friendship groups. It actually plays out in quite grown-up environments, like corporate settings and, doing their day-to-day errands. And it's interesting that it's so clear that it's inappropriate to respond that way, so it stands out, but it is definitely a teenage behaviour pattern.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's some of the symptoms that how this kind of plays out is people who have a chronic inability to manage money. They're always missing the important bills. They don't like doing the hard yards in relationship. They whinge when they're asked to step up. They're chronically messy. You know, the fundamental responsibilities of a relationship. It's kind of like, you know, once the romance phase has passed, then I just I'm in relationship, but I'm almost acting like I'm still living like a kid. Or you get the sense that what your partner wants is a kind of a parent or a servant. You know, there's a reluctance from me to step up and do the hard yards. I want to have the fun and the benefit of the relationship, but none of the more challenging things. And I will consistently tend to drop out. You know, I'll struggle to perform consistently in certain areas. So let's say, you know, I might be able to pay the bills on time for a couple of months, and then, you know, at some stage I'm going to forget to pay the electricity bill or the gas bill, or I'm going to lose the bill. You know, I will prioritise my time with my hobbies or my friends, pardon me, in a disproportionate way. You know, I'm not going to make my partner the priority, you know, in an adult dynamic. And it's not saying that we spend all of our time with our partner. That's not necessarily, unless that's exactly what the two of you want. But primarily what you tend to get is you get frustrated with the way that your partner tends to prioritise. You know, fun comes before hard work. Sometimes it does, but not all the time. This is the, you know, when it's time to work and do the challenging things, we do that. We see our friends once in a while, but if your partner insists that every Saturday afternoon is time for them with their mates drinking beer down the sports club, and you know that will then extend into Saturday night, and you know you're waiting for a date or a dinner, and again, once in a while, fantastic to do that. But when we consistently go, no, on this day, this is the day for my mates or my friends, you know, rather than go, I'm not making adequate room for my partner. Would that be a fair enough kind of thing to, as far as some of the symptoms?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the response to it is, like you mentioned, you know, those are some of the behaviours and the way that they play out. And if you challenge them, then they play out teenage strategies. So whether it's bargaining or, you know, saying, oh, I'll do this if you do that, or okay, fine, I'll do this, but then I want to do that. So whatever their strategy is, or they may argue, they may strop around, they may stomp their feet.
Sulking was a favourite one of mine.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see the different strategies play out. Or they will, you know, manipulate. You know, oh, you know, do the oh please, oh can we do this? All sorts of very teenage behaviours play out when they're challenged on those things that they want to do, and it's all agendaed around design the life that they want in their comfort zone, which is I get to do my things and you take care of the grown-up stuff.
Yeah, I like that. There's definitely an element of self-centeredness in this, and a reluctance to think of the us rather than coming out of I-based thinking all the time, or me-based thinking. You know, there's an inability to come up to the idea that we are an us. And that doesn't mean that from time to time we don't think about I, but if I'm only thinking about I and I'm not thinking about you or about us from time to time, again, that's a very much a kind of an indication of potential chronic immaturity in the relationship.
And another way that to add to that point is that they can either relinquish all responsibility, in a sense. I'll say, you make the decisions for me, you just tell me what to do and I'll do them, rather than taking ownership that, you know, that you drive as much the car that you would being in the passenger seat, if you will. So that's another way of avoiding that responsibility as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think that equality element, that equality theme is very, very important. And again, as PJ mentioned earlier, if you start to, I feel like I've got another child, or especially when you've got kids already and you feel like your partner is the extra kid, these are the kinds of things that can indicate that you're with someone who's potentially very, very immature. And the other element that's probably relative to, is my partner going to grow up or isn't, one of the strong indicators of that is, again, the kind of social group. Who do they surround themselves with? Because if their friends are chronically immature and refuse to grow up and have a mates first, partner second, very fixed kind of philosophy, then their social group is not going to be too encouraging of your partner wanting to take that next developmental stage and go, well, I am in an adult relationship that requires some changes in how I behave and more of a willingness to focus on the us of relationship. But we can be held back, can't we, by our social group, depending on where they are.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just because someone is immature in their relating style, it doesn't mean that they're not committed. So a lot of them could be married and have children, as you mentioned, or it doesn't necessarily show up as Peter Pan or Tinkerbell syndrome, where they're chronically single or can't hold down a relationship. Some of them are in committed relationships. But I'd pay attention to, when they are hanging out or they are on holiday or away, did the partner pack the bags? Does the partner have to remind them about appointments? Who does all of the organising? Who's holding the itinerary? And if that isn't balanced, then that's also another sign of the immature friendship circle as well. So, or do they have an attitude to their partner of, the hubby or the missus is on my back or on my case? How do they relate to their partner as the role that they play in their lives? So that's interesting how that dynamic plays out too.
I really like that idea, because I think that's sort of spot on, in the sense that this has nothing to do with, yes, we've got some immature behaviours appearing in a relationship, but as PJ rightly said, that doesn't mean they don't love you, and they don't love you very deeply. They just may not be capable yet, or even aware. If what they saw was in their own parents' dynamic a fairly immature. We've got immature role models, and we've seen people who didn't model healthy arguments, healthy embracing of responsibility, healthy sharing in the relationship. Then we're coming off that base as well, and we're going to have to learn. We're going to have to learn what being an adult is in the relationship. But absolutely, I really love that distinction. That doesn't mean they don't love you very deeply. And then it's just simply, okay, what do we do? What do we do about this? Because one of the things that sometimes is problematic and a symptom of immaturity in relationship is you will tend to have the same fights over and over again. They tend to be petty ones. And one of the things you're going to primarily experience is a sense of frustration. And this is probably, we're going to have a conversation about the difference at some stage between immaturity and abuse, but it's worth mentioning that, if you're with a chronically immature partner, you're likely to feel frustrated a lot of the time at their seeming unwillingness or inability to step up in relationship, whether that's kind of from a responsibility side or sometimes even from a romantic side, that they're not carrying their weight. But that's very different to an abuse dynamic where you are literally fearful of your partner in some way, shape or form, and on extreme eggshells. So, that's worth making a little bit of a distinction there. Again, like some of the other conversations we've had, this is an in-depth topic and we're only just giving it a bit of a surface skim. But is there anything else you want to kind of mention about immaturity? Maybe, one of the things I was thinking about in terms of sexuality and the way people show up in the world and the kind of attention they get, perhaps, might be worth mentioning.
Yeah. Well, yes, as you demonstrated, it'll be, flexing, whatever that looks like, and whatever female or male. The thing I was going to talk about is that the role that we assume then, consequently, and just to be mindful of taking up the other role of in this play, casting yourself as the parent and succumbing to what's insinuated, doing all of the work and picking up the washing and taking on all that responsibility, where then, if anything, you're enabling and feeding that dynamic. And there's no real urgency or unveiling of what's actually going on. So that's one thing to be mindful of, is just calling it out rather than playing that role, because it's easier to do that. It's less confrontational and things run smoothly and everyone plays their part. And also staying, centered and boundaried, and but I think the key thing is not to fall into that parent role as much as possible. So that was just another thing I was going to point out as well. Yeah. But yeah, we can certainly talk about the ways that it shows up as well, in terms of
wanting to get a bit of external attention.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's again, if our partner's a little bit careless, this does not mean necessarily they're having, actively having an affair or anything like that, though at its extreme it can be certainly taken to that. But if they tend to enjoy attention, I remember when I was younger and being in the gym and, walking around, as PJ said, in kind of an almost permanent flex, looking for any shiny surface I could see myself in, and I was very, very aware of trying to get positive reactions, particularly from the opposite sex, so that, there can be this external fixation that they have, even though they're with us, but I kind of enjoy attention from elsewhere, and I've got strategies for having people focus on me. Is sometimes a kind of key element, and just getting a bit more boundaried and contained around that kind of thing, where I'm happy with your affection and appreciation. I'm not necessarily spraying things out elsewhere and looking for other engagements, even if they're just very brief, shallow looks and things like that. Would that be a fair enough kind of assessment?
Yeah. And again, like you said, that's a real grey zone where it can cross over to the abusive dynamic and the immature in combination there. So, and I think the key distinction for me around that is in the intention. Is it to harm the partner, or is it to feel good about self? And we'll talk about that.
But that is a good, that's an excellent distinction. Yeah, absolutely. So, and just further to the point that you visited before, I think, if you are someone that's a natural rescuer, a natural picker-upper after other people, then you do have to be careful, because sometimes it, as PJ said, it can be very comfortable to fall into that role and figure that it's just easier if I do it. But remember then that you are missing out on true intimacy. You're feeding into that dynamic too. So and the balance, and you're missing out. So it's again, as we mentioned sort of earlier, this is a vast topic, and there are a lot of other kinds of symptoms that we can talk about. But I think that hopefully gives you enough to start to go away and kind of consider. But probably the thing that we leave you with comes back to, are we seeing a cluster of behaviours that are consistently and reliable and seem quite chronic? I always know that if we're going to have if they're going to mess up in some way, it's going to be because of their latest, get rich quick scheme, or something like that. That was never thoroughly researched. It came from a place of wishful thinking and fantasy. Oh my God, I've come across this great idea. It's going to make us $1 million or however. But there consistently is this kind of thing that they're going to drop the ball or mess up in some kind of way or can't step up. And when we come to pretty much be able to set our watch by those things, at some stage in the next 3 months, my partner's going to screw things up, or something like that. Then,
and that comes, like you said, in combination with 3 or 4 other things: the social group, or the not picking up after themselves, or always forgetting their dental appointment. When all those things synchronise in unison perfectly, then we've got enough information.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, thank you for watching this episode. We hope you found it interesting and informative. PJ, as always, great to have you sitting here with me and
So much fun.
and enjoying conversation. So thank you, and look forward to our next video together. It'll be great fun.
Indeed, me too.
Fantastic. Thank you for watching, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.